More than 24 Republican governors have created a task force they say is aimed at securing the U.S. Mexico border. The formation of the, quote, American Governors Border Strike Force, unquote, comes amid a surge of arrests at the border last month. The Department of Homeland Security is reporting more than 220,000 migrants were processed at the border in March. That's up 33% from the numbers in February, and it is the highest single-month tally in 22 years. CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez joins us now for more on this. Camilo, welcome. What is the goal of this so-called strike force? And help remind our audience that, yes, governors have an interest in immigration, but it is not their central function. It is the federal government's central function.
That's right, Major. According to the limited information that we have, this operation will focus on expanding collaboration between these Republican-led states on issues ranging from improving intelligence sharing, cracking down on human and drug smugglers, and training law enforcement officers in border states. But as you mentioned, these states legally cannot arrest, detain, or deport migrants under U.S. immigration law. Federal immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility that is overseen by the Department of Homeland Security. So the practical, immediate impact of this operation remains unclear. But what I think is clear, Major, is that this is part of the intensifying broader Republican effort across the country and in Congress to rebuke the Biden administration's immigration policies, especially along the U.S. Mexico border. We know that this underscores as well that Republicans believe that this is a winning political issue for them. And it's very clear that some Democrats also feel that this issue could hurt them politically and reduce their chances of being reelected this November. And that's why we're seeing some Democrats, particularly who are up for reelection in November, coming out, Major, and criticizing the administration for planning to end Title 42 in late May. This is the Trump-era pandemic policy that has allowed U.S. border officials to quickly expel migrants without processing their asylum claims.
And Camila, we'll get to more on Title 42 in just a second. But I know you know these numbers and the trend lines very, very well. Help our audience understand, because the numbers, as I just described them, sound large. They sound outwardly large. Are they? And does the Biden administration really have a vulnerability when you look at its track record in terms of numbers under its watch as compared to the previous administration, the Trump administration?
Sure. So these are the facts, Major. In March, U.S. border officials reported 221,000 migrant apprehensions along the U.S. Mexico border. That is the highest level of migrant encounters since March of 2000. But it is important to note, Major, that apprehensions do not equal unique individuals, because currently there's a very high rate of repeat border crossings, especially among migrant adults who are being expelled to Mexico and then trying to enter the U.S. multiple times. So they're being counted multiple times in these total apprehension numbers. However, the unique number of migrants coming to the border remains very high, and it is straining the government's capacity to process them. Title 42 right now, Major, is being applied mostly to single adults, including from Mexico and Central America, but most families with children and all unaccompanied minors are being processed under regular immigration procedures and are being allowed to seek asylum. So the U.S. is having to process these much more vulnerable populations. Title 42 remains in place, yes, but we're also seeing an unprecedented increase in migrant arrivals, and we're also seeing, Major, a seismic demographic shift, because in March, 40% of the migrants who were encountered did not come from Mexico or Central America. Increasingly, we're seeing migrants come from places like Cuba and Nicaragua, where the U.S. cannot deport large numbers of deportees, Major, because of the strained diplomatic relationships with those countries. So this is posing major logistical challenges for the Biden administration.
And you've mentioned it a couple of times, Camilo, and I want you to take the audience through Title 42. They're hearing a lot about it. Briefly, what is it? What is its status? And what is the political atmosphere around it? I know that's a lot to ask you, but I know you can take care of it.
Sure. So in March of 2020, during the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic, Major, the Trump administration enacted this unprecedented policy, citing a little-known public health authority to give border officials the authority to quickly expel migrants without screening them for asylum needs, and that is typically required in U.S. immigration law and international refugee law. So the Trump administration argued that it could suspend these humanitarian obligations during a public health emergency to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The Biden administration made some changes to Title 42, including to exempt unaccompanied children from the policy, but continued the overall order and has been expelling more migrants than the Trump administration, especially single adults. Now, we know that the CDC decided earlier this month that this policy, according to the agency, is no longer needed to protect public health and to stop the spread of the coronavirus because of improving pandemic conditions. But obviously, this has alarmed not just Republicans, but moderate Democrats who believe that this policy measure allows the U.S. to more adequately manage these very high flows of migration to the U.S. Mexico border.
With the policy, the numbers, and the context, Camilo Montoya-Galvez, we thank you very much.
Thanks, Major.